Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the 10th Annual Hemispheric Security Conference. If you're joining us online, it is a pleasure to see you on a virtual end. My name is Leland Lazarus, Associate Director of the FIU Gordon Institute for Public Policy. Just to give a quick recap of yesterday, we focused on economic security and emerging technologies, and we specifically had breakout session panels focused on port security, critical minerals, cybersecurity, and space. We also had great keynote roundtables with the commander of U.S. Southern Command, Admiral Alvin Halsey. We also had the Minister of Panama Canal Affairs, Jose Ramon Icaza. And today we're going to focus on transnational crime and environmental security. We'll dive deep into anti-money laundering, the role of extra-hemispheric actors like China, Russia, Iran, and others. And we'll also talk about the Antarctic and illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. And so we've got another packed day full of incredible topics and incredible experts from around the world in order to talk to us about these key national security issues. But to kick us off is the Dean of the FIU Green School of International and Public Affairs, Dr. Shlomi Dinar. Sir?
Thank you so much, Leland. My name is Shlomi Dinar. I'm the Dean of the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs. And it's a pleasure to welcome you to day 2 of the 10th Annual Hemispheric Security Conference. As Leland mentioned yesterday, we had the privilege of hearing from some of the most influential leaders in security, technology, and intelligence. Together, they explored the complex challenges facing our hemisphere and shared actionable strategies to address them. And there's no better place to host critical conversations like these than at Florida International University. This conference reflects FIU's vital role in convening experts and thought leaders to tackle the urgent issues confronting our world. It's also a testament to the Green School's mission and global reach. Our school is home to 8 departments and 18 of FIU's premier international centers, institutes, and programs that are driving impactful research every day. I'm deeply proud of the work being done here to shape a more secure, just, and sustainable future. Your engagement at this conference has already sparked ideas and conversations that will extend far beyond these sessions, conversations that have the power to transform policy and practice across the region. And we continue that momentum today. Today's lineup of fireside chats and sessions promises to further energize our discussions, especially around protecting both the environment and the people of the Western Hemisphere. Let's carry this energy forward, deepening the connections we've made and translating today's insights into meaningful, long-term impact for the region. We're grateful you've chosen FIU as the place to engage in these vital conversations. Your presence here reflects a shared commitment to shaping a real, lasting progress. As you continue this important work, know that the Green School is here to support you as a hub of expertise, innovation, and collaboration dedicated to addressing the hemisphere's most urgent challenges. I look forward to seeing the impact of our collaborations unfold as the remainder of the Hemispheric Security Conference continues. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of today's program. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Miguel Escoto. I'm a senior majoring in international relations and political science here at FIU. I'm an Intelligence Community Centers for Academic Excellence scholar at the Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy, where my research and studies center on authoritarianism and strategic competition in Latin America and the Caribbean and their impact on U.S. adversarial deterrence efforts. This morning, I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce the first panel of the day on Tren de Aragua. This discussion is crucial to understand how organized criminal networks shape security dynamics across the Western Hemisphere. Their growing presence threatens state institutions, cross-border cooperation, and democratic governance. Now I am pleased to introduce our panelists this morning. We have Douglas Farah, Senior Advisor on Transnational Crime at Fundación TAEDA, Pablo Zeballos, Senior Advisor at Fundación TAEDA, my professor, Dr. Eduardo Gamarra, Associate Director of the Jack D. Gordon Institute and Professor of Politics and International Relations at FIU, and our very own Myah Havertong, Doctoral Candidate in International Crime and Justice and Graduate Research Assistant at the Security Research Hub of the Gordon Institute. This morning's panel will be moderated by Dr. Anthony Pereira, Director of the Kimberly Green Latin American and Caribbean Center at FIU. Please join me in a warm round of applause to welcome this morning's panel. Thank you.
Well, I think the topic of this panel will be familiar to many of you. The prospect, the trajectory of a gang that begins within a prison and then becomes transnational has many variants in the region. I mean, the one that I know better than Tren de Aragua is Primeiro Comando de Capital in Brazil. So there are many of them. But I think we're lucky to have this group of experts here because they've all done research on Tren de Aragua and are able to get beyond the headlines. So I think if I can turn it over to Doug to present a paper that he co-wrote on Tren de Aragua, and then we can get the comments from our commentators.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to FIU, thank you to the Fundación TAEDA who helped us fund this research going forward. And it's a great pleasure to be here at FIU, where a lot of the conceptual ideas that we're going to be talking about today I did with the FIU Gordon Center and have had long experience with them. So I'm grateful to the support we've had. It's been a privilege working with Pablo Zeballos, who did most of the field work on this particular case in Chile and the Tren de Aragua. I want to start just putting in context the Tren de Aragua and what we're seeing regionally, and then Pablo will do a deeper dive on the Tren de Aragua itself and its expansion. We started with FIU's in an FIU study we did last year, looking at what we ended up calling the fourth wave of transnational organized crime, where if you look across the hemisphere, I think we're in a time of unprecedented change and unprecedented mutations and evolution across the organized crime world, of which Tren de Aragua is a fundamental part. So we defined the first wave of transnational organized crime, obviously Pablo Escobar. I'm not going to go into it in any detail. The second wave of Cartel de Cali, as they switched methodologies and moved from the Caribbean to Mexico and then north. The third wave we defined as the Bolivarian criminalization of the states, looking primarily at how Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador under Rafael Correa embraced transnational organized crime as an instrument of state policy. And in each of those three phases, you had one basic model. You had cocaine coming from Latin America to the United States and money flowing back from that back into Latin America. What we see now is a radically transformed landscape in which we have extra-regional actors, we have the Italians, we have the Albanians, we have the Mexicans, all with physical presence on the ground, and this new phenomenon which Pablo and I have begun calling the exoskeletal model of gangs now moving from their home countries to outside the country, of which the Tren de Aragua is the primary model. You also see it in the Trinitarios in the Dominican Republic, and other groups that go from their home base, then move into the diaspora communities, which is one of the fundamental defining features of the Tren de Aragua, is that they embed themselves in the Venezuelan irregular migration across the hemisphere. And as they do that, they begin to acquire power and move forward in different ways economically. The primary model being territorial control, not product control. So they are not a drug trafficking organization. They're a territorial control organization that will benefit from whatever transfers it: prostitution, weapons, human trafficking, drugs, of course, if they can get them, synthetics, cocaine, whatever is available to them in the spaces they take over. And they are characterized by extreme violence, as a way of announcing their presence. And I think that one of the things, then Pablo will talk about this in more detail, that we really struggle with is what is the Tren de Aragua? They are not a coherent, unitary group that moves, as I've dealt for many years with the MS-13 and the Barrio 18 in Central America, where you have a hierarchical structure. You know who the Ramfla is, you know who the programas are, the head of programas, you know who the clicas are, and you can map them out. Tren de Aragua has, we believe, and this is the work we've done in the region, a core group that is Tren de Aragua that comes out of the prisons that where Maduro, in fact, did release massive amounts of prisoners from their prisons, both to lessen the pressure internally and to begin moving crime across the region. I think one of the fundamental, but I don't think that means Maduro controls the Tren de Aragua in a coherent, consistent, and command and control structure way. But he can certainly suggest, move things, and help things, and make things happen through them at different times when it's most appropriate. And we'll talk about the case in Chile of the assassination of the lieutenant in Chile there, which was directly ordered by the Maduro regime. But I think you also have this new phenomenon where you have new groups who suddenly are aware that the Tren de Aragua nomenclature is very impressive. So if you want to rob somebody and you say, I'm Tren de Aragua, you lessen the chance enormously of them filing a police report or coming after you. So you have all of these franchise models now popping up where you can, if you declare yourself Tren de Aragua, you can do that in some cases as a franchise if you pay Tren de Aragua for the use of their name, or if you don't, they'll kill you. And you have these extreme violence as it spreads across the region. And what's interesting about these groups, as Tony mentioned, they are all criminal, prison-based. What we're seeing now, and Pablo will talk about this in more detail, the prison, the ability to embed and control prisons, where prisons have now become a much more attractive place for leadership of transnational organized crime groups to be, including gangs like Tren de Aragua, because they're safer there. They can conduct business from there. They control, the government traditionally controls the exterior of the prison, and inside the prison is the gangs now in their own, creating their own reality in prison and able to send out directives, orders, and carry out economic activity at a time where they're completely safe and protected by their own people. So the prison phenomenon is real, it's dangerous, and it's one of the major crises we're seeing. And what we're seeing is the Tren de Aragua's expansion model, their ability to adapt and learn is really fast. I think we tend, and I started with the MS-13 when they were just coming back to El Salvador in the 1980s and the early 1990s. I spent a lot of time with them, and they didn't seem like particularly studious, adaptive structures. They were pretty much very violent doing what they're doing. All of that has changed, and the Tren de Aragua has also changed dramatically. They study lessons learned, they study how police react to them, they study what the intelligence structure is, they know what the laws are, they know how to pick at the cracks in the system, which gives them an enormous amount of creativity in looking at how things move. We see with them and with the MS-13, the ability to move into the cybersphere in ways, in part because they're unfettered by any preconceptions. They don't really know what they're doing, but they're fearless. And so a lot of what they do ends up sort of working. People are like, holy cow, how did they do that with technology? Because they weren't afraid to try stuff that your professor would say, that would never work, don't do that. These guys will just do it. And then sometimes it works, not always, not even most of the time, but occasionally. So I think the Tren de Aragua is the manifestation of this fourth wave of transnational organized crime, being given its international ties, its territorial control, and its voracious ability to absorb into, to embed in communities, take over communities, extort communities, and raise enormous amounts of money going forward. And that is, you get more money, you obviously then have more power, you can buy more weapons, et cetera. And Pablo will talk about this case specifically in Chile, where they've had the only successful prosecution of major Tren de Aragua figures, but at great cost, and because you had very courageous prosecutors involved in the case, not because it may not be a replicable model, because most countries don't have that. So I'll leave it there. I'll turn it over to Pablo, but that's the context. And again, FIU has been very generous. TAEDA has been incredibly generous in funding our research, and we look forward to the discussion today.
Pablo?
Bueno, muchas gracias a la Florida International University y a la Fundación TAEDA. Disculpen, voy a ordenar mi idea en español, es más fácil para mí. Lo primero, decir que hay un dicho viejo que dice que los hijos se parecen más a los tiempos que a sus padres. Bueno, el Tren de Aragua es un hijo de este tiempo también. Y por eso ha sido tan difícil de entenderlo, porque es un hijo del tiempo que utiliza redes sociales para comunicarse, que se vincula a través de otro tipo de valores y que entiende las economías ilícitas de formas diferentes a como lo habíamos visto tradicionalmente en los grupos que habíamos estudiado. Yo llevo mucho tiempo investigando en el campo la presencia de estructuras criminales y el Tren de Aragua golpea muy fuerte a Chile por varios puntos y es un poco lo que vamos a tratar de ordenar, porque creo que ningún país está libre de este impacto, tenga el nombre que tenga. Hoy día el nombre es Tren de Aragua, mañana va a ser los lobos, van a ser los choneros, los pajaritos, como quiera llamarse. Hay un modelo criminal que está cambiando y ese modelo criminal tenemos que tratar de entenderlo para anticiparnos, porque genera efectos que pueden poner en riesgo la democracia y el Estado de Derecho en países más debilitados respecto a esos dos puntos. Lo primero, partir diciendo que el Tren de Aragua es una organización que surge de un fenómeno común en América Latina que hemos definido como la gobernanza criminal dentro de las cárceles o la gobernanza criminal penitenciaria. O sea, el Estado tiene cierto control sobre la cárcel, pero más bien en los perímetros, y la cárcel adentro funciona con lógicas criminales, donde existen normas, lógicas de poder, sanciones al incumplimiento del poder, etc. Ese fenómeno no es solamente venezolano. Ocurrió en Brasil con el primer comando de la capital o con el comando Vermelo, ha ocurrido en Centroamérica, está ocurriendo hoy día en Venezuela y es muy probable que esté ocurriendo en muchas de las cárceles de los países que dan por sentado que esto no puede suceder. Cárceles en Chile, en Uruguay, que dicho sea paso, Uruguay tiene 3.5 millones de habitantes, pero 16.000 privados de libertad. O sea, las condiciones que están allá adentro para la generación de estos grupos existen. El segundo punto es que el Tren de Aragua, pese a que se ha dicho que surge a raíz de lo que el presidente Chávez llama en su momento como la emergencia carcelaria, o dice no podemos controlar las cárceles en el 2004 y ahí en adelante, todas las investigaciones serias que se han hecho establecen que el nombre Tren de Aragua o la marca Tren de Aragua empieza recién a ser conocida por el 2014. Y eso sería aún más grave porque significa que solo 10 años han crecido muchísimo. Y por lo tanto, el componente esencial para que el Tren de Aragua se convierta de una de las 19 megabandas que existían en Venezuela a una organización con vocación y capacidad transnacional no fue una decisión que tomaron sus cúpulas, como lo tomaría una mafia tradicional italiana, ¿no es cierto? Que la cúpula decide vamos a ir a tal parte, vamos a enviar gente exploratoria. Lo que genera esa salida transnacional, esa vocación transnacional, es condiciones sociales. Y las condiciones sociales eran las oleadas migratorias poco reguladas, ¿no es cierto?, que empezaron a azotar a los países en Latinoamérica con una migración contracíclica. En vez de venir hacia el norte, hacia Estados Unidos, empezaron a avanzar hacia el sur. Y los países que no estaban acostumbrados a esas oleadas migratorias no tuvieron la comprensión de lo que venía atrás. Lo que vio el Tren de Aragua ahí fue una oportunidad de negocios. Y quizás esa es la primera forma de entender el crimen organizado o estructuras como el crimen organizado. Es un modelo económico que va a buscar siempre la rentabilidad y el bajo riesgo. Y avanzan y descubren que como Venezuela no está entregando pasaportes, no está entregando la documentación, los venezolanos que querían salir del país lo tenían que hacer por lo que denominan ellos mismos como trochas. Y lo que hacen ellos es controlar las trochas y cobrar por el paso de trocha. Y descubren una economía que es mucho más rentable porque quien no pueda pagar ese paso podía pagarlo transportando alguna mercadería ilícita, armas, droga, dinero. Y si aún así no quería transportar esa mercadería, cuando llegaba a su destino final tenía que trabajar para ellos durante un muy buen tiempo. Y eso obligaba al Tren de Aragua a empezar a enviar delegados a los lugares donde estaban llegando estas personas migrantes. Y esos delegados generaban en esas comunidades migrantes absolutamente irregulares cogobierno o un gobierno paralelo, porque esas comunidades desconfían de las autoridades del país que llegaron, desconfían de los modelos y lo único que saben es que hay un grupo de criminales que los trajo, que los controla y que les cobra por lo que están haciendo. Y si no pagan, no solamente tienen el riesgo de que los maten a ellos, sino que maten a las personas que viven en el país todavía en Venezuela. Esa forma de cohesión del Tren de Aragua fue lo que hizo crecer económicamente muy rentable. Paralelamente empezaron a traer otras economías ilícitas como la ketamina, una droga nueva que impacta a Chile, que se une con otro tipo de droga y que va generando un mercado ilícito que empiezan a tomar ellos. El problema que tuvimos nosotros en mi país, en Chile, es que la llegada del Tren de Aragua sucede el año 2018. Pero el 2019 nosotros tuvimos un estallido social, uno de los fenómenos más complejos sociales que ha tenido Chile, y eso generó varios efectos. El efecto más grave es la retracción del Estado, porque las fuerzas policiales se dedican más bien al control del orden público y abandonan muchos territorios. Lo que hemos hablado con Douglas muchas veces es que cuando un territorio está abandonado por el Estado no significa que no haya gobierno. Alguien gobierna ese territorio. El problema es que no lo gobierna el Estado. Y estas estructuras empiezan a dominar esto oficialmente en Chile el año 2020, o sea, 2 años después de su ingreso, con el ingreso de uno de los principales creadores del Tren de Aragua, que es Larry Changa, que está detenido en Colombia. Chile todavía negaba la presencia de esta estructura en el país. Recién en el 2021 algunas investigaciones empiezan a arrojar esa presencia, pero también disminuyen el impacto que han tenido. Entonces, empezamos a trabajar y empezamos a hacernos preguntas. ¿Cómo todo el mundo va a hacer Tren de Aragua? Porque es mucho. Y ahí descubrimos que lo que se ha potenciado últimamente, que es una de las características de esta ola criminal que observamos, que impone gobernanza criminal dentro de las cárceles, control del territorio, también tiene un componente poco estudiado que es el fomento y el potenciamiento de marcas criminales. Y ese es el riesgo, porque cuando uno potencia una marca criminal, todo el mundo quiere pertenecer a esa marca criminal. Y ahí donde nosotros empezamos a tratar de ordenar esto, y imaginémonos un árbol. Hay una línea que es una especie de sangre pura dentro de ese árbol, que es la línea Tocorón, o sea, las personas que estuvieron privadas de libertad en la cárcel de Tocorón cuando surge el planato, el sistema de gobernanza criminal intrapenitenciaria de la cárcel. De esa línea, algunos salieron en forma exploratoria hacia otros países. Algunos que salieron a esos otros países no tenían activos criminales para reclutar, entonces le ofrecieron esos activos que fueran parte de la estructura, por esa marca potenciada. Otros grupos criminales que venían del estado de Zulia, por ejemplo, y que no podían crecer muy rápido, se saltaron 10 años de evolución criminal hablando con gente del Tren de Aragua y pidiéndole que los franquiciaran, que les permitieran actuar en nombre del Tren de Aragua, y con eso ellos podían pagar una cuota, o debían pagar una cuota que le llaman causa, ¿no? Pero un componente que hemos visto, y creo que va a ser cada vez más evidente en América Latina, es que hay un mercado ilícito que permite el crecimiento de estas estructuras. Ese mercado ilícito no es la droga, porque gran parte de las ganancias de la droga terminan en la estructura criminal. Este mercado ilícito que permite el reclutamiento, el aumento de la cantidad de integrantes criminales es la extorsión. Y la extorsión está siendo muy poco estudiada en América Latina, en países como el mío, en Uruguay también, porque lo que hemos podido entender con el trabajo de campo con Douglas, que no es solamente un fenómeno del Tren de Aragua, lo hemos visto en Ecuador, en diferentes estructuras, la extorsión parece ser el sueldo de los criminales que integran una estructura criminal. Porque las extorsiones tienen una etapa cronológica. Yo cobro los 15 o cobro los 30. Y eso me permite tener mi economía personal tranquila. Todas las otras economías ilícitas, el robo de celulares, que es una gran economía ilícita, el contrabando de droga, el contrabando de cigarrillos, todo eso es parte de dinero que tiene que entrar a la organización. Entonces, para ir concluyendo respecto a este fenómeno, que podríamos estar horas hablando de lo que estamos hablando, de este tema, es que tenemos una marca potenciada, Tren de Aragua, que hoy día ciertas medidas que ha hecho el gobierno de Estados Unidos ha potenciado aún más la marca, y lo que podemos ver es un futuro medio difuso, medio complejo. No sabemos si este potenciamiento de la marca va a fraccionar en muchos trenes de Aragua diferentes, como ya pasó en Chile. El caso de los gallegos, que es el informe que ustedes tienen, es uno de estos fraccionamientos con identidad propia, que pueden ser aún más violentos porque tienen que marcarse dentro de la atmósfera criminal como diferentes. Y por lo tanto tenemos desafíos hipercomplejos, pero quiero quedarme con la última reflexión. El Tren de Aragua es una marca, pero detrás de la marca hay un nuevo modelo criminal de exoesqueleto, ¿no es cierto?, de criminalidad que sale de las lógicas, que tenemos que estudiar bien, porque hoy día se llama Tren de Aragua, pero mañana puede tener otro nombre y puede ser igual de peligroso para las comunidades más vulnerables de los países que nosotros provenimos o de los países que a nosotros nos interesa estudiar.
Thank you, Pablo. Just to continue with the program as it's written, I think we'll pass the word over now to Professor Eduardo Gamarra, and then we'll finish with Myah, who's doing a Ph.D. on Tren de Aragua. Thank you, Professor Gamarra.
Great. Thank you very much to the TAEDA Foundation, to the Gordon Institute for putting this together. It's a privilege to join this panel, and especially with my now co-authors. We just finished a project on the Dominican Republic, which will be published very, very briefly, I'm told. So which covers a lot of these topics with regard to the presence of these kinds of gangs and so on in the Caribbean. I want to basically talk about four things, and very quickly. And I know perhaps I'm going to raise some controversy that maybe was not called for at this conference, but I want to talk about a lot of what both Doug and Pablo have just mentioned with regard to Latin America, but as it applies to the United States. All right, and especially in the context of the last few months. And it seems to me that very clearly something that Pablo just said, which is extraordinarily important, that to a certain extent, by targeting the Tren de Aragua the way the administration has done so, what it has paradoxically done is it has increased its brand awareness and increased its, how should I put it, its attractiveness, not only around the hemisphere, but also even to a certain extent in the United States. And so here's where I'm going to propose four basic things. First, in my opinion, we ought to prosecute Tren de Aragua members in the United States, but within our own judicial system. Law enforcement in this country already possesses very robust tools, not only laws like RICO and others to prosecute people who commit violent crimes. And let's just take a look at it. You know, just very recently in New York, we prosecuted 27 members of Tren de Aragua in a very effective way. So number one, I think we have to go back to the strengths of our own judicial system in prosecuting these individuals. In large measure because by throwing them out of the country, we're often undermining American law enforcement efforts, such as the case of some of the people that we went after in Colorado, for example. The second thing I want to propose is that we ought to seriously look at very targeted intelligence-driven operations. And these, in my opinion, represent a much more strategic and legally sound approach than indiscriminate crackdowns that are largely based on, and we know this from the way we approach Central America, on very superficial kinds of criteria such as tattoos and national origin, right? Let me go back, in fact, something that Douglas has been working on for decades, the MS-13. The U.S. had a very important approach to targeting MS-13, the Joint Task Force Vulcan. That Joint Task Force can, in fact, be applied to targeting Tren de Aragua in the United States, right? Very significant successes, in fact, out of that Joint Task Force, right? The third thing, and this is probably the more controversial dimension of my response to this paper, is that in the United States, of course, in targeting these individuals, right, we have to adhere to constitutional due process protections, right? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've employed the Alien Enemies Act bypassing legal protections. And we're assuming, wrongly, that Tren de Aragua, and this is a very important contrast for us to understand. What Pablo and Douglas have identified in Latin America is absolutely certain. The magnitude of Tren de Aragua in Latin America is very different than the magnitude of Tren de Aragua in the United States, right? Most of the people that are now sitting in El Salvador's Secot prison are not Tren de Aragua. I think the calculation is that about 137 of them are Tren de Aragua. So when we classify them as foreign terrorist organizations, I think that's fine. But going the additional step is probably not the way to do so. In fact, as I said earlier, it may be even counterproductive. And then finally, I want to propose, and very quickly here, that maybe it's time to go back to think about a regional approach. And I'm talking about maybe we need to think about a regional approach that I call a kind of a Nuremberg court set up right in the region, by the cooperation of all the countries affected by Tren de Aragua, so we can set up prosecutions that target individuals across the hemisphere, but one, obviously in a very effective way, but at the same time in a way that is compatible with the human rights treaties that we have signed, that all of our countries in the hemisphere have signed. So I'll leave you with those 4 thoughts and turn it over to Myah.
Thank you. Myah?
Thank you so much. Good morning. What a topic to start the day off. I first like to thank not only FIU, but the Gordon Institute, and a special shout out to Leland Lazarus, who put this whole panel together. It's truly an honor to be up here with such distinguished co-panelists. And I think you're getting multiple perspectives, but I'd like to come to you all from a criminologist perspective, because that's where my degree is. So one of the key quotes, and I'm going to quote the report, is where they say that the Tren de Aragua is exhibiting an exoskeleton expansion model, and where members are embedded and preying on nomadic diaspora communities. And in that one sentence alone, I think you understand the true sentiment of who this group is and how they're operating. But I want to take it a little bit further. So we already discussed how one of the key components in their success is not only their following of migration patterns, but also their use of the faction and franchise system. And I think we can all agree that this group is extremely violent. But are there varying degrees in their behaviors, their degree of violence, and their expression of violence across the factions? And I think that's something that we need to discuss further. However, there's limitations to that, because as my co-panelists have mentioned, so many people are paying for the name, or there's the use of faction names. So this report looks at Los Gallegos. That sounds like it has nothing to do with Tren de Aragua, but it's one of the most successful and largest factions of Tren de Aragua. So we have to get into discussing that a little bit further. And I know that we've all agreed that they're extremely violent, but I think there's an adaptable expression of that violence across the different regions in which they have presence in. So we've all agreed that their presence and their behaviors in the United States will never mirror the way it is expressed and displayed in Latin America. The US's approach on crime and transnational organized crime is always been very different. Not even with the current administration or previous administrations would we experience the same degree of violence. For example, one of the case studies that I looked at was in 2023 in Lima, Peru. And the locals were anonymously reporting to news articles that they could hear people at night being tortured. They could smell the burning flesh of these people being burned alive. And they could not say anything because they knew it was a TDA faction. They knew where they were, but they couldn't report it. This is something that you would never see in the United States. But does that downplay the impact and transnational threat that they pose? Absolutely not. We understand what they're capable of. We understand that there's commonalities across the factions: extreme use of violence, extortion, migrant exploitation, sex trafficking, things of that nature. Those are commonalities. So that helps us to really decipher who this group is. And I also want to talk about how not only are they adaptable in their expression of violence, but also in their criminal portfolios. This group knows where they are. They know where the opportunities are. They know that the crimes that they do here are going to be different than the crimes that they do in Colombia. And it's going to be different from the crimes that they do in Peru. So they're understanding that the criminal markets are varying, and they're taking these opportunities to exploit them. So when we are looking at this group from a criminology perspective, we have to understand that they are very opportunistic. And another thing I want to delve into is understanding the group dynamics. So when you think about this group and everything that we've said before, and maybe everything that you've heard about this group in the past, you don't think of morals and principles, but they have their own version of morals and principles. And so when I talk about that, this report focuses on the Gallegos faction in Arica, Chile. And one thing I thought that was extremely notable was that the members that were identified were not only from Venezuela, they were also from Colombia. They were also Dominican, they were also Chilean. And that is something that is very profound and not very common across traditional groups. And it ties back into my co-panelist Doug Farah's point that we are seeing a very different transition of transnational organized crime. We're not seeing the hierarchical, the typical hierarchical route of la familia, la raza, the pride in who they are. It's a very different approach. And so with that, I want to bring it to some of my next points, which is talking about how future research should approach this group. And not to insert my dissertation, but to insert my dissertation, I am looking at this group very intensely. And one of my analysis parts is going to be understanding how they're utilizing and exploiting social media. And that is a key component that distinguishes this fourth wave of transnational crime now from any other type of waves or groups that we've seen before. It's a new area in criminology that's understudied, and it provides a significant gap that we need to understand. Social media is becoming a key component in our lives and also in the criminal world. So we need to understand that criminal cartels such as the Sinaloa cartel, they're using Twitter, or X, depending on how old you are. They're using TikTok and Instagram to promote and recruit members. Is TDA doing the same? And so from my preliminary research, I've seen that it's a little bit of everything, a little bit of promoting and glamorizing this mafia criminal lifestyle. It's also glamorizing and promoting their use of violence to intimidate and incite fear, not only in the locals, but in rival gangs. When I first started studying this criminal organization about a year ago, I got a lot of confused looks, turned heads, like, who? What are you talking about? What is that? And now you talk about the group, and it's like, oh my God, I know what you're talking about. I know that group. And it's an interesting shift that's brought me up here, but it's important that we understand that the media is going to play a significant role. And we need to know how the group is identifying themselves if we want to develop tailored approaches. So how is the group utilizing social media for their own self-reflection? Are they identifying as rebels? Do they see themselves as revolutionaries? Are they trying to rationalize their crime, or are they just trying to promote that they're ruthless criminals? And from what I've gathered, they just want to prove that they're ruthless criminals. They're live streaming brutalizing people. They're live streaming murders and torture. This is not by chance. This is a strategic method. And if we're going to approach this group and the many groups alike, we need to understand that a lot of their actions are not by chance or reactive, they're very strategic. So we need to be strategic in how we approach them. And so I also think it's important to note, and I'm so happy Dr. Gamarra was the one who brought it up, the FTO label. As a criminologist, we have a lot of discourse on labeling transnational criminal organizations as terrorist organizations, largely because there is not a global definition of terrorism. So if this group is operating in multiple countries, and we will definitely need collaboration across countries to combat and dismantle them, how can we do so if we can't even agree on the label? So there's discourse there. While I understand labeling them as a foreign terrorist organization allows us to enact certain things and to tailor our approaches towards them, are we doing them the right way? And I will try to wrap up, because I've got 200 pages worth of thoughts on Tren de Aragua that I'm trying to spit out rather quickly. When we're following and supporting deporting these individuals to El Salvador for their prisons, I have questions in regard to how are we identifying these individuals? On what basis and on what grounds were these individuals selected? If it's just tattoos, that warrants a lot of stress. And is there a clear distinction for law enforcement to identify gang membership and gang affiliation? Those are two very different aspects that need to be taken heavily. And so I will close with a Band-Aid approach towards all transnational organized crime and a band-aid approach towards all of the factions of Tren de Aragua will not and has never been an effective method. Thank you.
So we've had a fascinating analysis here. We've looked at prisons as incubators of Tren de Aragua. We've talked about franchising and branding of this criminal group. We've had policy recommendations. And we have a few minutes, very few minutes, for a couple of pointed questions from you. So the mics are right here. If anyone would like to get up and ask a question to any or all members of the panel, I'd welcome you to do so now. And they will have to respond very quickly, I'm afraid, because we're going to be told to get off the stage quite soon.
And the questions
Yes.
need to be quick too.
Thank you.
Hola, buenos días. Soy Gustavo Azócar, soy venezolano, soy periodista de Venezuela, recién llegado a la ciudad de Miami. Y tengo un planteamiento que voy a dejar para todos los miembros del panel. Pareciera que hay dudas en algunas agencias de Estados Unidos con relación a la vinculación del Tren de Aragua con el gobierno de Venezuela. Recientemente nos enteramos que algunas agencias, a excepción de Homeland Security y el FBI, dicen que no tienen evidencia que compruebe la relación del gobierno de Venezuela con el Tren de Aragua. Los que venimos de Venezuela y hemos padecido al Tren de Aragua en Venezuela, quisiéramos darle a estas agencias de Estados Unidos todo lo que tenemos para comprobar que sí hay una vinculación cierta del gobierno de Maduro con el Tren de Aragua. ¿Quién sacó al Tren de Aragua de la cárcel de Tocorón? ¿Quién permitió que el Tren de Aragua saliera de Tocorón 72 horas antes del operativo que se hizo en la cárcel? Entonces,
Señor, para permitir a las otras personas preguntar algo, podemos parar aquí.
Solo la interrogante es si la investigación que han hecho ustedes permite confirmar esa vinculación del Tren de Aragua con el gobierno venezolano.
So, question about the link between the Maduro government and Tren de Aragua. Yes, Luis.
In the same way, I would like to, maybe Pablo, you said when the state doesn't exist, you know, there's a different governance, right? In this case, I think the key is how the level define what is going on.
Okay.
There are a lot of people helping the Tren de Aragua all around us. And my question is very clear. Are terrorists or not?
Okay, are they terrorists or not? Yes.
Did you find any connection between Tren de Aragua and the mafia in Albania and the Italian and Albanian mafias?
Okay, great question. Yes, let's take two more and then we'll throw it back to you. You'll have about a tweet's worth of response.
In terms of the next phase of Tren de Agua's evolution, do you see an opportunity for them moving beyond an emphasis on Venezuelan diaspora communities and establishing themselves in countries with less of a diaspora based on sort of
less of a
the next step in evolution?
Diaspora.
Thank you.
Okay, great question. Thank you. Yes, finally.
I would like to know if there are any further insights, maybe from the Ph.D. candidate, regarding the recent designation of foreign terrorist organizations and how Tren de Aragua might expand and if they will adapt in the future.
Un minuto.
Okay, thanks so much for these questions. I have to reduce you to about a minute each, so you can tweet your final thoughts.
Well, I think that the question on the state sponsorship, I think is yes and no. I think there are clear indications that the Tren de Aragua responds to interests of the Maduro regime, but is not guided solely or commanded by the Maduro regime. On the use of social media that Myah brought up, I think that's incredibly important to understand that. The links to who's helping them into terrorist designations, I think the intelligence community is pretty clear that I think the reduced thing that they're not controlled by the government is a little bit simplistic, and I don't think that's what the document actually says. I think there is this relationship, but not a linear relationship. And I think on the question of the Ndrangheta and the Albanians, we have not seen that yet, but I don't think it will take long for them to get there. I don't think it's something you can say won't happen. I think it will happen. I don't think we've seen it on the ground yet where the Albanians and the Ndrangheta are operational.
Thanks. Pablo?
Bueno, yo respecto hay una investigación activa en Chile sobre el asesinato de un disidente, un militar disidente, Ronald Ojeda, y que fue ejecutado por el Tren de Aragua, por el integrante del Tren de Aragua y aparentemente, según la hipótesis del fiscal, por instrucciones que vienen de algún sector del poder actual venezolano. Y aquí viene la primera reflexión. El Tren de Aragua, como grupo criminal en esta nueva modalidad, es esencialmente un modelo económico, por lo tanto va a trabajar con quien le pague. Y si ese pago no es solamente en dinero, puede ser pago también en protección. La operación Cacique Huaycaipuro del año de noviembre del 2023, no sabemos si es la principal operación del régimen de Maduro contra las cárceles o ha sido la fuga más grande de la historia de criminales que hemos observado. Eso lo va a determinar el tiempo, probablemente sea un componente de ambas cosas. Lo que sí, nosotros hemos visto que quizás la pregunta hay que darle una visión diferente. El gobierno o lo que gobierna Venezuela no es un grupo férreo. Hay muchos grupos de poder dentro del propio gobierno venezolano. No sabemos si alguno de esos grupos de poder tiene alguna relación más cercana con el Tren de Aragua. Hay un gobernador que cayó en desgracia, Tarek El Aissimi, que era del estado de Aragua y que de alguna forma en su periodo creció esta estructura criminal. Y por lo tanto, las dudas son esas. Lo que sí podemos tener certeza es que cuando Chile o cualquier país como Perú, como Ecuador, como Colombia, requiere información sobre integrantes del Tren de Aragua, no hay una respuesta oficial del gobierno actual venezolano para entregar los antecedentes a esas personas. Eso puede ser negligencia, eso puede ser incompetencia, puede ser que no tengan los datos o puede ser complicidad. Esto podríamos definirlo, estamos en el final de la temporada 1, pero viene la temporada 2 de esta serie que se llama El Tren de Aragua y por lo tanto es complejo. Y finalmente, muy breve, la posibilidad de que el Tren de Aragua se vincule con otras estructuras criminales de otra naturaleza no las hemos evidenciado, pero es muy posible que suceda porque vivimos en una atmósfera criminal donde ciertas cosas se licitan por parte de estructuras superiores. O sea, la posibilidad de vinculación existe.
Thanks, Pablo. Professor Gamarra.
Sí, para contestarle directamente a Gustavo, y lo voy a hacer en español para que... esos estudios a los que te refieres, que son uno de una agencia de los Estados Unidos y otro es Inside Crime, tienen que ver con Estados Unidos, no tienen que ver con la importancia de los vínculos entre el gobierno de Venezuela y Tren de Aragua en otras partes de la región. Y esa es una distinción muy importante, porque la magnitud del Tren de Aragua en Estados Unidos no se compara con la magnitud del Tren de Aragua en América Latina. O sea, no hay comparación. Si tú analizas los casos que han tenido gran cobertura mediática, el asesinato en Georgia, lo de Colorado, por ejemplo, acá en Doral, ¿no? Un caso. En total son muy pocos casos donde efectivamente se demuestra un vínculo de Tren de Aragua con crímenes específicos. Lo que sí sabemos es que no hay una invasión venezolana de los Estados Unidos lo suficientemente importante para justificar la designación o la utilización de este famoso acto de 1798. Ahora bien, la pregunta acá, lo que ha sucedido, sin embargo, es que la estigmatización de la comunidad Venezuela es tal que se ha llegado básicamente a la percepción de que todo venezolano en Estados Unidos es Tren de Aragua. Esa es la estigmatización que yo creo que es importante hacer la distinción. Y precisamente, no solo al decir que hay unos criminales que son Tren de Aragua y vincularlos con aquellos que tienen TPS o que tienen el parol humanitario. Ahí es donde está el debate en Estados Unidos, Gustavo, ¿no? Y por eso a lo que me refiero es que ese estudio, esos dos estudios importantes nos dicen lo siguiente: no hay evidencia de que el gobierno de Venezuela tiene un gran involucramiento en una invasión de los Estados Unidos vía Tren de Aragua. Okay.
Thanks. Myah, you've got about 140 characters because
Excellent.
we're being
Don't
told
worry.
we have to get off the stage.
I think my panelists have done an excellent job at answering all the questions, so I will take my attention to the one that was directed specifically at me. Are they an FTO? Depends who you ask. Depends on what we're talking about. So our justice system likes to look at motive, and how does that determine the charges and the labels. Our justice system defines terrorism as having a political or religious motive. Tren de Aragua does not have that. So you can say maybe not, but if you also look on the flip side, are they using violence to incite, intimidate, and instill fear in the residency where they are? Yes. So it's difficult to decipher. Are they going to expand? Yes. How many characters do I have left?
About 3.
Wonderful. Bring us back for the 11th Annual Hemispheric Conference, and we'll tell you how they did over the last year. Thank you.
Thank you to our experts who could have spoke a lot longer about this than we had, and thank you for your questions.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick 5-minute stretcher. So stretch your legs a little bit. We're going to have some time to move a chair and then kind of get the next panelists mic'd up. But in the meantime, also please consider if you want the QR codes around here in order to donate for our HSC 2026 fund. And then also make sure to look at the booths outside. We have various organizations that are sending out some of their materials, so also make sure to go to the different booths out in the lobby to learn a little bit more about the incredible work that our partners are doing as well.